Hi, welcome to my presentation, Supporting Student Technology in Workforce Training Programs. The question is, should higher education entities be responsible for technology needs of their students, to include hardware and Wi-Fi access? My name is Melissa Sadler-Nitu. I'm doing a research for the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley for Dr. Crossland, March 7th, 2021. The problem that we have is that many of our adults that would like to go into education and training programs pre and during COVID will have difficulty accessing the quality of technology that they need to be successful in classes, specifically online classes. So some things that we do know, most adults will need higher education for skills required to work. Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board recognizes that the primary purpose of students entering the college system is to obtain better paying jobs, better than is possible without a higher education. We have evidence that directly connects technology and the completion of degrees. Colleges also continue to experience low completion rates, and technology is one of the key factors. So barriers to completion are intensified with the absence of technology for would-be students during the pandemic. The identification of the issue is that we have the potential of missing an opportunity to skill up our workforces, our local workforces during pandemic, because people who have been laid off and they have the ability to do some online coursework, specifically with government funding that's been handed down. If they don't have the right technology in their hands, they won't be able to do that coursework, and we run the risk of them and re-entering into the workforce with the same skills they had pre-pandemic. So some things to look at about the identification of the issue is that workforce boards financially support adults through workforce training to obtain target demand occupations. Funding that workforce receives can pay for college tuition for adults that need additional training to meet their target demand occupation entrance to the workforce. A challenge that we see in San Antonio that's a more local challenge is that job seekers are in need of training during the pandemic has been a lack of dependable technology and Wi-Fi capability at home. So the question becomes, should higher education entities be responsible for the technology needs of their students? That includes the hardware and Wi-Fi access. The overview and definition, there's two things I'd like to point out in these definitions is that as a result of the institutes of higher education moving to online course delivery, there is a concept of student technology ownership, and it became an essential part during COVID of participating in any kind of skills development. The digital divide is also referred to as digital equity, and it is about understanding the difference between necessity and luxury and the public perception. This is particularly important for any kind of institute of higher education that's receiving public funding, because many of our federal funders in their language and policy have referred to technology as a luxury, not a necessity. So assumptions, we have to work off the assumption that people may have coming into this research. And the first one is that students are currently responsible for their course equipment. And when I say this, I'm thinking of currently students are responsible for technology, not technology, the textbooks, anything that they have to purchase to be a part of their coursework. And this has been a longstanding expectation of students and sort of a common understood. The second assumption is that the digital divide can be the difference between student achievement and student failure. So arguments for colleges purchasing student technology. The first argument is that institutes of higher education can provide digital equity to their student bodies. However, it may take some adjustments in culture and in policy. The second argument is that students would like to have their own technology, and providing laptops with Wi-Fi along with their college tuition is an excellent selling point for attracting new students. The research show very few colleges are providing laptops for ownership. Most of them have large loaner programs. So the third argument is supporting large loaner programs requires resources that colleges may not have anticipated. And those types of resources go along with inventory, tracking of devices, helping out with maintenance, having staff available to upgrade, re-image, deal with theft and the breakage of different technology. The fourth argument for is digital equity is necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, and lifelong earning, and access to essential services. Arguments against purchasing student technology. I have two key arguments against, and that is that the first one, institutions of higher education already provide financial assistance for students to purchase technology that is required for class participation. While this is true and it could be budgeted for, one of the surveys from a reference shows that students that had to choose between paying rent and purchasing technology felt that there were other basic needs that they had to meet before they could actually go out and purchase their technology or maintain their accounts. The second argument against purchasing technology for students would be that many people do not understand the additional costs of delivering courses online aside from the student technology needs. So colleges have had to invest in a significant amount of platforms and security type of spyware, malware, all those kinds of things. And that has incurred costs where they can't lower costs to include the student ownership of technology. The validity analysis of the arguments are that the research proves there is a direct link between student success and the ownership of technology. Research proves that the inability to maintain technology resources directly links to higher education performance. Therefore, during the shuttering of the campuses, institutions' trend has been to increase their technology loaner programs. Yet loaner programs seem to be a band-aid for the underlying issue of providing equity and digital access for student populations. The values compromised in this research are that human capital theory suggests that the way out of poverty is through higher education. There's a direct link from education to income. That theory has taken us from the 1960s to now, and so far it did prove an upward trend in income relationship. However, that's beginning to level out now. Also, the value here is digital equity, which is directly related to social justice. But digital equity is a relatively new concept and therefore could be considered a new value. My personal position is that I have experienced the loss of student technology when changing jobs. And I can attest to the fact that in between jobs, when I came from a job at an institute of higher education and had all of the technology at my fingertips and moved into a corporate private job, there was a gap that did affect my student, my personal coursework as a doctoral student. I was unable to present as I normally am. I was had to shift from using a Mac to a PC, and it caused quite a few obstacles that I had not anticipated or experienced when I had the technology available before. So it It was disruptive, albeit it was brief and probably not nearly as disruptive as somebody who struggles with technology on a regular basis. The research findings are that we cannot expect people to be successful in education and training that requires resources unavailable during the training. And I think we have moved into a place where you can no longer get by with the books or without the technology. And that's sort of an old type of thinking. There is a direct connection between success and technology access. And while loaner programs may offer some solutions, they do not solve the problem. And I predict these problems will only increase as we continue to expand our digital culture and society. Suggestions for problem solving. My first recommendation is that institutes of higher education find ways to ensure, rather than assume, that students have the technology access to Wi-Fi and begin before they begin to complete their studies. So they need to have access from the beginning to the end. Practitioners that wish to implement technology for student ownership need to closely review instructional, state policy, federal policy, and in that particular order. So looking first to the local policy to see if anything that precludes an organization from purchasing technology could be resolved in the local board meetings. Something that becomes a state issue has to be resolved with state advocacy organizations. Something that becomes a national, it has to be resolved with national advocacy. And here are my references. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.